Great. So let's give it 1 second here.
Okay.
Okay, let me just do this.
All right, you're off and running.
Great. All right. Hi, everybody, and welcome to Undercurrent Live, and also welcome to Commonworks. And we're very, very excited to have today two remarkable people on the show. And again, if some of you were looking for Mark Eckert, guess what? You got me. Now, I might consider myself an upgrade. I don't know if the viewing audience would at all. But all joking aside, Mark Eckert today is still in the midst of launching a new platform, which is coming out in the next 2 weeks, on his experience being a person of color and growing up in America. And we're really, really excited to support that and share him on. But today's show is really one that I've been excited and really been thinking about. And it's we're sort of blending a few different topics here, sort of life's work, the organization's work, and importantly, sort of how that all comes together with soul's work. And I'm very excited to have Satyen, who is a fellow Undercurrent partner on the show, and probably without whom which we couldn't even begin to have a meaningful and authentic discussion about soul's work, given Satyen's background. And I'm going to sort of get us into a little bit of the background for sure on all of us. And but the one thing I want to talk about first, of course, is I'm going to first introduce Satyen, and then I'm going to move over to Cynthia Davis. And then after I introduce everybody, we're going to start to move into what I think are some pretty juicy and potent topics about, sort of aligning your soul's work with the work of your business. And basically also, are you in alignment with your life overall? All of which is incredibly important and something we take very, very much to heart at Undercurrent for sure. Satyen, along with his wife, Suzanne, created basically a multi-million-dollar transformational academy called Warrior Sage. And Satyen over the years has impacted over 100,000 students in 50 countries around the world. And it's absolutely stunning what he's created. And he had about 35 years of rigorous study and practice in creating sort of enlightened business growth and developing higher consciousness. And he works not only with powerhouse people like Cynthia here, but with other CEOs, high impact individuals, executive teams, and basically many people who want a deeper balance and illumination and self-equalized equilibrium that he calls peak existence. And Satyen, you can talk about that a little bit if you feel so called to, a little bit later in the show. But Satyen is basically, not just a mentor, advisor, and confidant to the powerful and influential, but he's also had an outsized impact on the formation of Undercurrent as well, and does a beautiful job of synthesizing sort of Eastern wisdom and Western, pragmatism, if you will. So can have his feet in both sort of the ethereal world and the material world, or the default world, as we like to call it. And, so I definitely look up to Satyen for sure as somebody who is just, just like basically a fully formed human being. And I really appreciate that. So we'll talk a little bit about how to get in touch with Satyen at the end of the show. Meanwhile, Satyen has brought on the show Cynthia Davis here, who has just had an absolutely remarkable career. And before we went live, I was commenting to her that, like, you're a total badass. and probably literally, not to mention, metaphorically, because Cynthia's career has been at just gigantic defense companies, Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, GE, and then transitioned all of this incredible leadership experience in these. The one thing I do want to point out is, you've done all of this work and sat really at the top of leadership in so many of these male-dominated cultures, and so I'm especially impressed at sort of the navigation, that I have found, at least in my experience with some women, that they've had to do, and so you've taken all of that and you have basically alchemized it into your own consultancy, which is called Radiant Blue Group, and have now taken like all of that wisdom and extraordinary leadership experience and are now helping others, in somewhat similar spaces, and I'm sure many spaces just outside, of what your kind of vertical experience was in the defense contractor world. And so really excited that you're here, and I'm a fan, and and so here we are, and super excited just to kind of talk about like what sort of the meaning, what is the meaning behind this. And Satyen, I sort of want to kick it over to you because work versus soul work is something that you speak of, but it's also something you felt really important to sort of bring to the table here with this audience. And if you could just sort of give us a little bit of insight in terms of like, what does that actually mean? And then, at some level, how do you actually put that into practice? And Cynthia, please jump in anytime, because I'm sure Satyen's going to call you out on it.
You called him fully formed. I'm in the process of fully forming.
There you go. Well, compared to Satyen, I kind of have baby legs. So it's like, yeah.
Well, thanks, Rob, for such a wonderful introduction. And Cynthia, always wonderful to be with you and play with you and share with you, and all friends who've showed up here. I feel this is such a valuable share that we have today, because it's for all of us. It's more than just for us. This is for all of us. We are in a very powerful time of personal as well as global evolution. We all know this. We don't know it here, we know it inside. And so soul's work versus everyday work, we know what everyday work is. We know the traditional methods of how we got into work, the value structures, the intentions that brought us in there. We know the system and how it works. Many of us have great understanding of that value personally, as well as how we execute that in life. But are we fulfilled? Are we feeling within ourselves a great joy? Are we feeling within ourselves a great peace? Are we feeling within ourselves that we are fluid and aligned with life, aligned with nature? Are we allowing ourselves to experience the fullness and the richness of existence? Ourself, our bodies, our lovers, our children, our families, our communities. And so for me, soul's work is coming back to the essence of what we truly actually are, which is something far greater. We're saying the word soul, but really it's undescribable. We can call it the essence of who we actually truly are. And I've found through the years that many of us in leadership positions, in organizations and leadership, we are aiming to create things, but most of it is created from the mind. And we've disconnected from the wisdom, the sensitivity, and the inner navigation, which is always profound, that arises from the soul level of being. So soul's work is bringing our mind, our life, our whole experience aligned with what our soul truly wants. And I feel that our soul, being freedom itself, not the search for freedom. Within the search for freedom, we always move away from the soul. But when we find what our true soul's work is, what are we here to do? To live, love, and die complete, so that we live without any regrets. What can I do today to live fully, to love fully, to experience fully, to share fully, to bring myself and my gifts fully to the forefront of life, so that I can die with absolute complete peace of mind? That's a big bar. That's a very high bar. But my challenge and my invitation is, if we don't search for that depth of meaning, then we're doomed to continuously create the world that we've created, to create the unfulfillment, the lack, the extraction mindset that we have in business. But when we're willing to take the risk of finding, even asking, what is my soul? Where is it? What does it feel? What's the truth of my inner navigation? And we start surrendering and feeling and aligning and acting from that, then we're going to go from peak performance, which is pushing, yang energy that eventually burns out, into a whole new paradigm of peak existence, where our business is flowering because we're flowering. To me, that's the essence. The flowering of our soul is the flowering of existence, is the flowering of joy. So that's what I wanted to start off with. And I know Cynthia has much to share around this, and I'd love to hear what you have to share about that, love.
You know, so first of all, Rob, thanks so much for having me. And Satyen, thanks so much for the added invite. For those on the call and for you, Rob, I don't know if you know our relationship, but I've been a student, colleague, partner with Satyen for a number of years. And literally, when I think about just the full expression of stepping into everything he just talked about, the opening for me was having stepped into the Warrior Sage community. So I'm just, you know, honored to be here and honored to be sharing the same video screen with Satyen. So I appreciate that. And Satyen, when you talk about that, moving from peak performance to peak existence, I think I am like, you know, at the side of the milk carton. That was me, right? Because I was very good. And you say, Rob, you know, badass. That was me in my career. And I just absolutely knew how to play the game well. I knew how to perform. I knew how to show up. I knew how to get results. I knew what the effect needed to look like and what was expected and how to raise the performance of the organization. So I was in that world of peak performance. And really, when, you know, people think about it, or how they would term it would be, hey, you're at the top of your game, when I decided to step away. And the stepping away was really my starting to ask the questions that Satyen was just referring to. So I was very much in peak performance, but I also had this, I was the epitome of, well, okay, the next promotion, the next, you know, the next car, the bigger house, the boat, everything else was going to add to my having that sense of fulfillment, or that sense of I finally arrived, or that sense of just, you know, fully feeling fulfilled and happy with where I was at. And none of that was doing it. So none of it was doing it. It was a crack in the door was opened for me. And I just had the opportunity to say, what else is out there? I need to go figure this out. And so, you know, we all have our own individual path, and it leads us to, and when I asked, you know, hey, I need the right teacher. I need to be in the right environment. I need to be in a space where I can actually go do my own soul searching and figure this out. But yet I still had to live in the world. I still had kids. I still had a career. I still had things I needed to do, and I had obligations. So I stepped onto that path, and literally it was transformational for me to really recognize that there was so much more, and it was really about an inside job. And when I started doing that, I could show up as a leader in a very different way. And today, you know, starting my business and being able to go back into those same industries with some of those same leaders and colleagues, and be able to work and share the combination, right? The bringing together of, it's not just about peak performance, but it's really that sense of how you show up as a leader and really raise and elevate the organization and who you're responsible for in terms of the leadership that you have. It's a whole new ballgame. And so I've been loving it. And our business is just taken off when we brought this element of soul work into the real work that we're the doing work that we think we have to do every single day, and show how we show up. So it's been a wonderful journey personally, and now my opportunity to build a business and give back and do this with other companies and other leaders.
Beautiful. Cynthia, I have a question for you, because you just brought something up that's really interesting. A lot of the people that we talk to at Undercurrent have undergone some sort of a personal transformation themselves. And oftentimes what'll happen is, you know, it could be anything, right? It could be, you know, somebody who's gone through something like Leader's Quest, maybe even somebody who's gone through Warrior Sage, but, or been to Burning Man, right? Or just simply listen to their children and grandchildren, you know, basically complain to them about how business as usual is screwing the planet up. And whatever it is, however people arrive there, oftentimes what will happen is they find themselves out of alignment with, you know, their values are now out of alignment with the businesses that they founded or the companies that they're in leadership of. And it's then hard for them to sort of figure out how to kind of take this big machine and kind of shape it, you know, to be more of a force for good than more about business as usual. So that's, you know, that's a little bit about the experience that we have, but often there's like a tip, you know, there's there's something that finally just is like, you know, like it's a claw. And I'm wondering, you said you sort of had that moment, right? Some moment, or maybe it was a, you know, a sequencing of moments, but what was that like for you when you sort of said, I really want to step into something different? And how did that happen?
So interesting, and thank you for asking that. And I really, when I share some of this with people that I mentor or different women's groups that I work with, I often say I don't recommend what I did for other people, because literally what I did was I came to a place where I was driving home one night and I felt very unaligned. I felt very, very torn, and I knew that I was not where I wanted to be. And I didn't know what to do about it. I wasn't equipped with the wherewithal to say, okay, my values are shifting, or how I view the world is shifting, and how do I deal with this? And the way I responded or reacted to that was I went in the next morning and I gave it my resignation. I gave them my 2 weeks. Okay, I do not recommend that, because it's, you know, so for some people that's a, you know, how do you bridge that into something else, right? Because, okay, if I'm no longer the president of that division, then who am I? And I literally went through that, right? So I stepped out, and then I had no idea. And I went through kind of a really, a lull, if you will, of kind of a dark place of trying to say, okay, now what did I just do? And I say that because once there is that place where you realize that maybe there isn't an alignment, there's an opportunity to really recognize and go within and say, okay, I get that what I'm experiencing out here is not what it's not enjoying, I'm not enjoying it. It's not fulfilling for me. It's not, you know, and you can recognize all of that. But I think the tools really are to go within in terms of just really recognizing I don't have to go out and try and change all of that all at once. Right? It's really doing the inside job, as opposed to, well, I'm looking around and I need to change this, or I need to change, you know, Joe and Sue and Tommy, and they shouldn't be doing all this. And I'm trying to affect something out there, as opposed to just going within and really spending the time nurturing the shift that's happening within. Right. Yeah. And as you can go through that space of just nurturing that and finding and surrounding yourself with you know, similar people in a similar place, or those who can mentor and teach and coach to help you through that transition is going to be best. For me, like I said, I did it, you know, this kind of cold turkey thing, and I was just, unfortunately, you know, it was fine, and I had the wherewithal to manage through that lull. Right? Not everybody always does, and so they end up in just a very, you know, okay, now what do I do now? And then they end up kind of going back in, and, you know, right. So to me, it's really being, instead of reacting the way I did, it's pause and respond and recognize that, okay, there's a shift and it's happening in me. It's not about everything that's out there. And I'm not here to change all of that right now. I'm here to work with the shift that's happening within me and understand it and start to nurture that and grow that and start to gain the understanding and wisdom of what it's all about and who I really am.
That's really interesting. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I mean, I myself had two fairly significant, what I would almost call like existential shifts, you know, where the first one was being in the marketing world and sort of recognizing that really I'm selling useless shit, and, you know, and I'm marketing basically obesity and diabetes, and what am I doing for the world? And that began my first significant transformation into like mostly what I'm doing right now. And my second one was, you know, sort of Satyen, you and I are, you know, both, you know, sort of followers and friends with a gentleman named Daniel Schmachtenberger, who once he sort of exposed me to sort of like what is going on with civilization design, that dropped me on the couch for a year. So I was like, it wasn't like a cold turkey thing. You know, I literally just like, that's it. I'm doing nothing for a while. So I get those transformational processes and how powerful and potent they can be. Satyen, what's a little bit of your process? Can you share that with us in terms of the people that come to Warrior Sage and come to you, and, you know, where they were when they came to you, and sort of what happens on the other end? So
many of the organizations and leaders that come, they're sensing that they've gone to the extent of what they want to create. They recognize that they are powerful creators, that they can create what they wish, but they're yearning and they're feeling that there's something that wants to be created that's arising from a deeper place, more than just their mental desires or their traditional forms of how we create and get creative to create whatever's next. There's what we want to create, and then there's what wants to emerge to be created.
Right.
And that's a deeper arising from existence itself, metaphysically speaking. And because many of us are so cut off from the sensitivity to what wants to arise to guide our life, personal and professional, that the first steps is to find out where are the interference patterns in the mind, in the emotions, in consciousness. Many of us, regardless of what level of leadership we are, at the very top of leadership, as an example, we have years and years of imprints, of interference patterns that are clogging, if you will, the freedom and the flow state that's available, and the deeper creativity and sensitivity and awareness to what wants to be birthed next. And so we continuously push ourselves to operate from the mental sphere or from the intention sphere of our default state of being. So part of our process is to find out, what are the interference patterns? Where are you struggling personally? Where are you struggling in your business? Where is one struggling in their relationships? What is hidden, buried, suppressed about our feelings in life? Hidden, buried, suppressed feelings in our relationships with our family members, our loved ones. Hidden, buried emotions and tension and stack up with our teams, our organizations. So I'm a sleuth looking for all of those interference patterns collectively. And then when I see them internally, externally, well, we've come to recognize, and this is an ancient wisdom, that the interference patterns we have within our being manifest themselves in the outer reality. If you look tense and you look like this, and you're looking at the mirror will reflect back the same. If you're in spaciousness, possibility, if you're in the sense of empowerment and that you're free in your state of being, you're not tense, then the universe reflects back the parallel experience, but magnified. So this basic mirror reality is one of the first things that we do, to take a look at, where am I generating these deviations from peace of being? Where am I generating? And where is my structures, the alignment? Where's the misalignment in my teams? Where are the interference patterns, psychological interference patterns, that are creating and recreating architectures that are so long and convoluted and extreme and complicated? All of the architecture we've discovered that's created in business that's complex starts here. Once we're able to clear, and we have very specific processes to identify, resolve, and bring into integrity and alignment and coherence these interference patterns. And when we do that inner work individually, as a CEO, as a leader, then when we do it with our executive teams and then subsequent larger teams, then what happens is there's a deep alignment that happens, a very powerful flow state that starts to occur. In the East, we would call it, we're entering the state of the Tao, where it's far less effort, but far more effect. So in other words, the essence is I'm looking for where is there excess stress, struggle, where is there excess interference patterns within, get to the root of them, do the inner transformational work that we need to, get the teams aligned, and then really launch into, how can I say it, a way to experience and to build our businesses and to grow them that's aligned with our soul, that's peaceful, that's good for the all.
Beautiful. Have you found, Satyen, that people go back, you sort of in that aligned state, and with that clarity of purpose, back into their companies and find that actually the company isn't necessarily in alignment with their clarity and their purpose, the executive leadership team, and then they start to make shifts and changes to the very sort of fundamental operating system of the organization itself? I'm just curious if that's.
From my experience is that when we have a leadership team that can get this and have the first initial experience of transforming their own internal barriers and seeing how their internal barriers being transformed create such aliveness, freshness, creativity, business growth, then the belief is here. It's not an outside belief. It doesn't need faith. It's like, wow, I've proven it for myself. That living embodied proof then transfers to the next stage of the teams. The teams go, listen, you see where I'm at? You see how fluid things are? You see how I used to be in struggle? Then the executive teams come in. And our processes are very powerful because they're not woo-woo. They don't require belief or faith in some metaphysical concepts. They're very direct, exact, and specific, using really ancient methods of self-illumination combined with a very modern cutting-edge psychotherapeutic processes that eliminate these stressors rapidly, profoundly, and deeply at the core, so they're not re-manifesting themselves as you're in your continuous launch to the next degree of success and expansion. So I believe that the proof is in the living it, the proof is in the demonstration, and that's going to get the other team members going, I want more of that. And that's what we've seen over and over again. And then once we have that buy-in, they have their internal experience, then it's just, there's no barriers. The company can go wherever it wants to go, from any sense of limitation into literally infinite possibility.
Wow, beautiful.
Can I add to what he just said?
I was just going to ask you, Cynthia, how that's landing and then how that works with your organization.
Yes, because it's beautiful how he articulates that. It's just so ironic to me to have learned and experienced, and I experience this with a lot of our clients as well. And so in retrospect, we can actually laugh at ourselves, right? But it's the whole mirror projection, right? So that's when I said, you want to go out and you want to change. I got to change everybody else out there to align with how I'm feeling right now. And it's literally just a 180. That's why you have to kind of go within and really start to do some of the inner work that Satyen's talking about. And then that gets projected and reflected back to you in your team, in your workforce, in your environment, right? So when I look back on it, and I always, kid about, my 5 bosses that, they were just, I found them egotistical. I found them, I didn't really regard their intellect. I had, and so I'll just get promoted and get another one. And I got the same one in a different bodysuit, right? And then I got the next one and the same one in a different bodysuit. And I kept repeating this pattern. And what is so profound is learning the fact that those were all my teachers showing up. All my teachers showing up, that I had all this, this projection going on. It was all about what was going on for me, right? And so the whole thing of doing the work that Satyen's saying, are really, as the leader, starting to take accountability and responsibility for what's being projected and showing up, changing it here, and then seeing how it starts to show up in the organization is a whole new ballgame. It's a whole, and then you have what Satyen's talking about, people saying, well, okay, how'd you get there? I want that too. I want to, what is that? Tell me what that's about.
It's so interesting. The organizations like Warrior Sage, as effective as they're incredibly effective, right? And there's almost like, I sometimes look at it as kind of a consciousness hack, in a way, but like in a very powerful way, because what Satyen's able to achieve in a relatively short amount of time with executive leadership teams compared to sort of people that are on their own journeys and don't have that structure and that kind of, mentorship and leadership that both Satyen and you, Cynthia, have, it's often a life's journey. And we also know that, of course, all of this is a life's journey, even after you go through any of this. I mean, we're still, we learn until we die. And it's just our choice to whether we want to listen, and take in the lessons. And at the same time, I'm fascinated by just like the efficacy of the work, and how blending those disciplines, keeping your foot in sort of like what I referred to earlier as the default world, so as not to go like over woo and then lose people, but to be able to like really powerfully meet people where they're at. And that to me feels like kind of, that's where the magic begins and the alchemy sort of begins there. So I've looked at your website, Cynthia, and, it's interesting, right? Because I get who it's targeted to. So I get a really strong sense of like who the clientele would be, and, and sort of meeting people where you have to meet them where they're at. Right. So it's about winning, it's about performance and stuff like that. And that's what that was like sort of the read that I got from it. And I'm wondering how you feel about like, what happens when you engage with a client, you're meeting them where they're at in terms of what their goals and objectives and desires are. Are you able to sort of then sort of Trojan horse in alignment work? Is that a little bit of what's happening for you? Or is it pretty much like, this is performance and this is about leadership? I, Cynthia, just happen to come from, a very grounded place in leading you through this work.
It's interesting. Great question. Trojan horse. I don't know if it's a Trojan horse because we're pretty upfront with.
Okay, good.
Yeah, we really are. And, it's interesting, Rob, because we find that, and again, this may be a reflection of who we are as a business, but we find our clients are very open to that, right? I mean, we have we're pretty leading edge in terms of just being with our clients and supporting them in terms of not only how do they build their business, but how do they do it in a very sustainable way, in a way that, we always talk about, hey, it's about the greater good, and is that something that they're aligned with, right? And 9 times out of 10, yes, that's where they want to go. They just don't know how to do it. How do I balance that? Because most often you find people that will get to a certain place and they say, well, I can do all this in work, and then outside of work, I'll do good. Right? I can go do my, do my family thing, do my charity things, do my philanthropy thing, but somehow they don't know how to actually merge both and make it kind of a life balance of how you actually, look at life and what you do, and that your work is actually can be built off of a value set that is about, truth and wisdom and the interconnectedness of all souls and for the greater good of all. And you can have both. And to me, when I hear the word like soul's work and undercurrent, what you're doing, it's to me, soul's work is the resilient form of capitalism. It's almost like, right? It is the sustainable form of capitalism. Yeah. And I'm probably one of the most qualified people to talk about this because I've just been in industry for so long that I've seen, the cycles of leadership, if you will, where we kind of start out with the leaders that was very autocratic, and we did the carrot and the stick, and that was, right. And that was an acceptable, and that's where I grew up, right? I mean, that was an acceptable way of doing business. I was like the first woman manager in a GE manufacturing thing, and it was the carrot or the stick autocratic environment, right?
Yeah, and all against Six Sigma too at the same time.
That came it was interesting that you say that, Rob, because then all of that type of leadership started to be taboo. You can't be that way, right? We have to, let's move into get our employees involved, right? And so it was the Six Sigma, it was the total quality circles, it was all of the various programs of the month, right? And that was the illusion of allowing employees to be part of something. But it really, what it was I'm the leader, and I'm going to talk about, we're going to do, equal opportunity and diversity and inclusion. And so I'm edicting what the program is, and there's this illusion that somehow everybody's involved, and that's still not transferred. So you might get short-term benefit from it, but again, where are they all? It's gone.
Yeah.
It's nothing of any of those things that were sustainable and that really impacted your bottom line so that you could really do something with the service of the profits that the company is there to generate, right? And it's not until the leader who is recognizing that, hey, what's going on here, is a reflection of who I am as that leader, and has a huge degree of self-awareness about that, and is bringing the values and the mission and the vision and bringing the organization together in such a way, that's soul work. That's transcendent leadership. And that's what we're just embarking on. And that's what industry needs more than anything. So do we come in with a Trojan horse on that? Or do we just come in and talk about, if you want to win and sustain the success, you as a leader have to show up embodying that in a very impactful inner expression of who you really are. So you can't fake it.
Yeah, beautiful.
Right?
Satyen, I had a comment, but I want to make sure you had a chance to build on that if you would like.
Well, that was really wonderful what you shared, Cynthia. We are at a tipping point, and either we bring ourselves and engage with the tipping point that's happening in consciousness regarding business, or we deny it and we keep our head buried and we stick to the old paradigms. And that's not going to work. Companies, organizations from small to large will all start to fail. I truly believe so, if they stick with the old paradigms of how they're doing things and forget about the soul at work, in work, and the soul being the essence of our joy and freedom and love and liberation and states of flow. And so how do we do this? What's the first step? One of the things I've noticed in my work is there has to be a willingness to face the discomfort of how it's always been done, and to find the vulnerability and the courage to say, I am ready to take our organization, our business to a whole other level, to transcend how we've been doing it before, to come into alignment with the next higher set of values and principles to live from, to act from, to create the architecture of our businesses from. That takes great courage in the face of all the momentum that's gone on up to this point that has perhaps created great success, or perhaps mediocre or medium success, however one subjectively generates that. Yet if we want a profound type of success that starts from within, which is omni-win, as Cynthia was saying, good for the all, and that we can start yearning and allow that yearning to be operating at that level of being, all we have to say is yes to that call as leaders. Yeah. All we have to say is yes to that vulnerability, the fear of re-scripting everything. It's usually not that case. You have to re-script everything, but that can be the fear that I have to do everything A to Z, everything will change. I'll lose all my money, my security. Those are all irrational fears that will arise in consciousness. But when we stay the course and say, yes, I'm willing to face all that internal insecurity, the internal re-scripting, the internal recreation of my brand, my company, my organization, my very self, that courage and that vulnerability will pay off in ways that is unimaginable. Cynthia, you've experienced this. All the leaders, all the organizations we work with at Warrior Sage are experiencing this daily, that courageous vulnerability to go beyond the past, to embrace transcendent leadership, ways of resilient business as we're sharing in Undercurrent. Then what happens is I truly believe the force of the universe supports us. It totally supports us. And when we feel that support that comes through synchronicity, it comes through opportunities that we could never imagine. It comes through non-linear leaps in success that didn't come from a strategic model. but that comes from how did that happen? That's all the emergence of our soul aligning with our work, aligning with the world, aligning with our teams.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's, it's amazing what happens when you really embody what you're both talking about and what you end up calling it. It's astounding. And I've experienced it time and time again. I just didn't have words for it, or the proper verbiage for it. I just, I've had a lifetime of doing, different transformational experiences and stuff like that. I feel like we're kind of at a really interesting point now, where culture is embracing this. And I think what's also happening is, we're moving through such a turbulent period in this, this moment. And so what I'm seeing is that, culture is ripening even more, for something like this, for that feeling, because we're sort of sitting in the abyss of, of so many unknowns. And the things that we think about at, at Undercurrent are sort of like, and this is where I came from. I came from very much like systems level thinking and strategy and narrative and architectures and stuff like that, and was often so caught up in that place that I wasn't really paying attention to my soul. It was like, this is what I know, and this is very much, sort of like head and instinct, head and gut, if you will, but there was very little heart. And I was sort of like, oh, well, my heart's not for business. My heart is for my family, the people who I love and care for. My mission at business was to win. And, and when I felt into my competitiveness, I was able to do it, right? But the unhealthy shadow side of it for me wasn't necessarily even about winning. It was actually grounded in a root trauma around failure, and like sitting with that. And so it wasn't really, my breakthrough didn't occur until I actually sat with my trauma and felt into that. And then that's, for me, that's like actually where the meaningful transformation started to occur. And Satyen, you and I, even though we were in different cohorts, had a somewhat shared experience, doing, some deep dive trauma work. It's almost 2 years ago, maybe. Or more, over 2 years ago. And, and I remember because, well, first of all, you and I met at the end of your cohort. And I remember just like this groundedness and this like, and I couldn't tell, is this guy earth or is this guy water? Like, who is this cat? And, but all I can say is like, I could feel that in you. And that was actually quite helpful to me, just so you know, even though it was a brief encounter, it was just yet another layer in the sort of like, how do I go forward in a place of what we like to call surrendered leadership. And so, what I sat with for a long time after that is, if we're going to get large companies and organizations, and this is sort of into sort of like the theory of change of why Undercurrent exists, because we know at the end of the day, if we're going to start thinking multi-generationally, if we're going to think about the future of our planet, our humanity, we're going to do, and if we're going to do things like make nature a stakeholder, right? What kinds of business decisions would we make, if we were sitting in leadership at a large organization and had all of this as like a real stakeholder, in sort of the business, so to speak. And so we started with that systems thinking, that broader theory of change. We'll get corporations. They're the ones who are pulling the levers of political will. We can't necessarily change government overnight, but we can certainly change what is actually driving government at many levels, lobbying, political campaigns, so on and so forth. We'll just change the companies. And then we're like, okay, that's great. That's our theory of change. And then it was like, wait a second here. We can't change the companies unless we actually up-level the human beings inside the companies, because that's what companies are. It's just a container of human beings, that happen to be generating business or doing whatever. And that's actually when we were like, okay, if we're going to consult companies the way we used to do it in that 1.0 version of Undercurrent, there was a past Undercurrent that was all about performance, engineering, but also brought in things like holocratic tendencies and decentralized decision makers who were on the path, but we hadn't really awakened as an organization. And this is a much different organization now. We recognized instantly, like, holy moly, we've got to bring in a consciousness team. Like we have to have the best people in consciousness out there who can do what Satyen does. And that's when we asked Satyen to be a part of this mission. I'm curious, and the reason I said all of this is because it wasn't until I really confronted my own trauma that I was able to start to like really unlock my potential. Right. Cynthia, I guess I have a question, when you're in with leadership teams and stuff like that, does that come up at all? Or is that just something that's just so deep and so it's like, it's hard to get there in the course of like how you consult?
It often comes up. It often comes up as, let me back up just a moment to give you a little backdrop. We do meet people where they're at. And one of the things, Satyen and I have talked about this many, many times, because we'll take people through different stages of leadership, right? In transactional leadership, transformational leadership, and then transcendent leadership. And I don't even have to use those words necessarily with a client, but when I describe a business and the effects that are seen in a business when you stay at that level of transactional leadership, or that you move into a level of transformational leadership and what the effects are there. And then I express the effects and the impact of being a transcendent leadership model or style of showing up as a leader. They all say, I want that. How do I get there? How do I get there? And then we get to kind of unravel, well, what's keeping you stuck where you are? And inevitably, Rob, it will always, as you kind of be that sleuth that Satyen was talking about, it gets to a place where literally they're sitting with such a personal wanting to unwind something. And and we give them the space and the opportunity and the tools and the resources to do it. I've literally had, business owners and 3 or 4 people of the executive C-suite team working as a team, and we'll dim the lights and go into a kind of a meditative experience to understand and start to reveal what's showing up for each of them so that they can actually collaborate in a more constructive way and recognize the interconnectedness among themselves so they can leverage that and show up as a leadership team in a transcendent way. And would I have done that 10 years ago? Probably not. But like you said, we're at a tipping point, and I think the world is waking up to there's something that at a level of consciousness they want to operate and experience life in a more fulfilled, sustaining, meaningful way. And so when they start to look at their organization, not just as people that are there to do my will, but there's an interconnectedness of souls here wanting to accomplish a higher mission, that's a whole different ballgame. And when you describe, is that what you're looking for? They said, yes, I just don't know how to get there. What does that look like? Right. And it's even like some things like you could look at their set of values. And sometimes when I see a business and meet them where they're at, they have a value of, it's integrity and teamwork and results. Well, those are all effects, right? They're effects that you want in your organization. But what if you shifted that instead of just results as a value, why don't we have a value of representing the highest good of all? That's more transcendent. That's a place of where, people can all connect in that. Because how do you define results? Well, it's at the whim of the leader. What are the results what's the targets I'm given? What do I have to achieve, right?
Yeah.
But if I'm going for that, the higher good of my stakeholders, not just my shareholders, right? But like you said, hey, who are all my stakeholders? If I'm aiming for that, I just raised the tide of all boats. Everybody's now playing in that game, nice. Right? And so, yeah, it's leaders and businesses are ready for it when they understand what the possibility is for them personally, and as a leader, how they can be so much more impactful in really expressing what it is that they're in the position to want to be doing. And
So-
I've always found that every entrepreneur, their business is just an expression of who they are. They're just wanting to figure out how to do it in the highest and best way.
Yeah. It's so interesting how you talk about it. I really appreciate that, that, in most large organizations, the KPIs are all in some way, shape, or form tied to ROI, and we sort of know, when you're thinking about when you're operating in the world of quarterly results and shareholder primacy, it's very hard to have soul's work actually be able to sort of, show up, in a way that doesn't strike fear in leadership, because, of course, that's the life of somebody in a public company, for example. But what we've been talking about as of late is don't think about ROI, think about ROC, return on culture, and sort of like, what does that actually mean to you? How important is it? Keep the metrics and analytics away for a moment, and let's talk about what does it mean to have a more embodied workforce, a workforce that's operating in more coherence. And you get, the eyebrows raised, but then people start to get it. So it's really encouraging when I hear both of you who are in the field, so to speak, like us, that it is in fact a fairly ripe moment, and that people are open to transformational work and transcendent work. Like that to me is like, that to me is wonderful. We're ready. I think the world is ready for the kind of work.
It is, but I don't think Satyen or I, in running a business or working with my clients, I will never go soft on you. It's an and game.
Yeah.
We will have a return on culture and we will have a return on investment, because it's an and game. And in a transcendent place, right? I've risen above the need to have it one way or the other, right? Yeah. I'm now, it's not the polarity of either I have one or the other, right? I remember once somebody said to me, I was talking about improving the performance in the organization, and they said, well, Cynthia, what do you want? Do you want higher quality or do you want it fast? So I want fast quality, right? I mean, I want both, right? Right. And it's that thing. I don't have to choose between one or the other. When you're operating from this space, it's an and game. I can have both. And I don't have to
humans, right? Hey, Cynthia, and all the companies that we work with, right? All of our teams, it becomes an end game. The deeper growth that happens within happens without. It's very simple,
Beautifully said. Yeah. It is.
What is, I have a question, and we're in our sort of last 7 minutes of our show here. It just came up for me, which is sort of like, what's the graduate level work look like? Does the graduate level work, shoot you into a totally different color and spiral dynamics, or, are we in teal? Are we, or I'm just kind of curious, what happens when you get to like those higher and higher levels of consciousness? Is there even a place in a company anymore that's going to be able to hold that? Or,
absolutely.
So that is a rhetorical question. I fully admit
it's the Archimedes principle.
Yeah.
The deeper you become, the less effort it takes to create maximum impact.
Yeah.
Simple as that. As your grades go up in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and martial arts, you do way less work to achieve far more outcome.
Yeah.
And much of our drives that we have at a certain stage of our consciousness, as we pointed out, we shared, has a lot to do with unresolved family dynamics, unresolved traumas. There's a part within us that wants to appeal and make our father, mother figures happy, whether they're alive or not. There's parts of our self-esteem issues that want to somehow project themselves as strong and mighty and capable and such. And then we become excessively driven in some way. We might produce external results that other people can go, wow, but internally that excess push, that excess yang energy in the universe, somewhere along the line will create oneself to get knocked down. There'll be a balancing force to counteract the excessive energy and intention that's happening in an extreme in another area. Everything in this universe, in our businesses, wants to come to a natural state of equilibrium. So rather than do things and then figure out later when I've hit this goal, this goal, this goal, then we'll come to equilibrium. How about we start from equilibrium as the strength and the core of our being? How about we resolve these unconscious family dynamics, internal dynamics in ourselves, in our teams, so we're growing valiantly, but calmly, in a centered way. We're growing from strength rather than grow to fill this unconscious need to feel fulfilled and strong later. Rather than deferring freedom to tomorrow, we train ourselves to start from the freedom we already have now. That is essential so that the root of our freedom is what's flowering and watering and nourishing our businesses. So we have to deal with the inner chaos and then transform it into coherence. It's the way of, it's always been this way. And the fact that we're waking up to it now in our business is because if we don't, we're going to collapse. Internally, our own businesses, and we will have ecological collapse. Right now, we have to recognize and have the courage and the vulnerability and the willingness. Most people listening to this have great capacity. What I'm going to ask here for and call and invite and challenge is, can we raise our willingness to lead our lives and our businesses from this depth that we can intuit from this conversation? There's more going on than the words we're hearing. I'm sure your body and your soul is resonating and responding and starting to flower by all that's being shared. That silent power is wanting to be heard. That silent power needs to be heard. And when we hear it and when we respond to it, then as Cynthia shared, it's an and experience. Inner awakening, inner peace, equilibrium, natural joy and freedom now that results in not trying to have people follow you, but people naturally wanting to follow you because of your resonance, your presence, your radiance, your impeccability, your integrity, and that you're tapped in to the greater good. That is something naturally that all leaders will want to come and follow. And that's what will bring us to the next stage.
I'm in.
I'm in.
We're all in. We're all in.
We're all in. We all have to be in, really, right? It's like, it's a great game.
Yeah, for sure. And what a sort of wonderful way to sort of have our outro from this really, enlightening chat. Yeah, I mean, Satyen, thank you. I mean, every time you speak, I'm just like, I'm the student and I'm just like, what's he saying? And then inevitably it always takes integration. Like, so when we're done, I have to just sit with this for a few minutes because it's always something that I learn that's just these wonderful nuggets. Yeah, Cynthia, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your experience. And it's really beautiful to see kind of like, how one transformed his or her own life, with Warrior Sage in that, as part of that transformational process. And obviously you kind of have come out the end in a place where it's just like, I very much want to honor what you're doing and what you're bringing to the world and appreciate it. And, in particular, I really, really appreciate the piece around, the question of whether it's a Trojan horse or not, because we get into that sort of debate. How much can we actually bring to people or to companies without completely blowing them out of the water? And sort of meet them where they're at, but at the same time, stretch people a little, and move and then hold hands with them through that stretch, if you will. So maybe just in conclusion, can you each let the audience know how to find you, how to reach you? It would be quite wonderful. And yeah, love to hear. And if somebody on the undercurrent back of house can just maybe put the website URLs into the chat, that would be fantastic. But yes, Satyen and Cynthia, please tell us how we can find you.
Perfect. First of all, I'm in Florida, so it's a welcoming state. If you ever are down south, I'm just north of Naples, so it's beautiful. But my website is radiantbluegroup.com, and my email is cynthia.davis@radiantblue.com. So if there's anything that just as you're on your own journey or looking at how you bring some of this to your own business and you want to chat, I'm always available. I just want to honor you, Rob, for the forum that you've created and the opportunity, and certainly my teacher and mentor and colleague and friend, Satyen, I'm always going to be on this journey, and I have a sense that I'm always going to be on this journey with his mentorship throughout the way. So I've appreciated that, and I continue to appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Thanks. And Satyen, can you let us know how to
Absolutely.
get a hold of you at Warrior Sage?
Yeah, we can put Warrior Sage, and I have my personal website, which is satyenraja.com, and you can find out more about my work with organizations there. And then my email directly, satyen@warriorsage.com. And I also welcome you all to reach out, chat, if you want to discuss anything that's been brought up here or have any reflection. It'd be my joy to connect. And Rob, thank you so much. It's so great being on this collective team of Undercurrent to really, bring business to the next dimension. Cynthia, it's always a joy and a thrill seeing your work expand, the impact you're making in the world. It fulfills my dharma, so I'm very grateful. And thank you all for listening and joining in. And what I ask is that you don't just sit with this, that whatever's moved, reach out, make contact with Rob, make contact with us, and let's respond to the call and trust that the arising will be met with a return on investment in a way that we can't even imagine. It's that trust.
Beautiful. Aho.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Much appreciated. All right. Take care.
Bye.